all the code that we'll be going over this unit will be in this repository. So I'll link it there. So you guys can, if you guys need Git, you can clone it, or you can just download it directly. Download zip. Okay, so today we'll be going over HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Essentially the core of every website that you ever go on. And you'll probably be able to learn the rest of basic front end really quickly after this meeting. The first thing is there's something called VS Code. I'm sure many of you already have. VS Code is a text editor, and that's what I'll be using throughout this unit. Just download for Windows or device. And this is VS Code, essentially. Okay. First thing is HTML. This is a basic HTML page. It's not showing anything right now, but the doc type, this tag, signifies that this is an HTML page, and this entire file will be rendered and interpreted by the browser. So what I'll actually do is open with live server. So I right-click my HTML file, and I say open with live server. And that's an extension you can add to VS Code. But you don't need to do that. You can just open that with Chrome. But what this allows me to do is I can edit and save, and it will automatically refresh. So that's convenient. I'll actually put this on the right. Okay. So an HTML page is made of tags, as I went over last time. This signifies it's an HTML page to the browser. Comments are done by bracket, exclamation mark, and 2 dashes, just like this. That's an HTML comment. And these are all tags. So essentially two angle brackets, the name of the tag, and some of them will be like this one. This is a self-closing tag, which means there's no ending like this. It's self-closing. The other ones, like the head tag, this is just a standard tag. So an HTML page will have the HTML tag, and then we'll have the head tag. This is where the metadata goes. So the metadata is like data about the site for the browser to understand. It doesn't actually get rendered. So if I change the title, I say this is CSS demo. This isn't actually rendered on the page itself, but you can see that this title changes to CS Club Demo. And I'll be using something called emit snippets throughout the meeting, which isn't too important for you to know. But like if I want to say H5, and inside I want to have a span tags, emit is basically just a shortcut that allows me to go like H5 into span, and it does the same thing. So just to clear that out of the way. Okay. First thing I want to say is the browser is rendering these tags. So I'll go over some basic tags first. Here I'll say, after I just copy this. Here are the heading tags. So I go like this. So you'll see that the browser renders 5 headings, and these are signified by H1, H2, H3, etc. And this actually goes on to H6 as well. Yeah. These are heading tags. The next thing will be a paragraph tag. So if I show you a paragraph tag here, here's the paragraph that gets rendered on the screen. These are 2 pretty common tags, like the most common tags you see on any website. And then I'll go into, you can bold text and you can italicize text, just how you imagine. So if I wrap this with a B tag for bold, you'll notice that this becomes bold. And then if I wrap this with I instead, you notice this becomes italicized. And there's something similar to these 2 tags. It's called strong. Strong is the same as bold, and M is emphasis, and that's the same as italicized. So this leads me to my next point, is that HTML5, the latest version of HTML, introduced something called semantic tags. So these tags hold more meaning than just the tag itself. Like previously, you would have to, if you wanted a footer or a header element, you would say this is your header class. And I'll go into that later too. But you don't have much options before HTML5. And once HTML5 was introduced, you have tags such as header. And this is really helpful, as you'll see later as well. And again, there's several tags for this, so you can imagine delete. Well, actually, you might not be able to see that. Can you see that? Yeah. Over here, the delete tag was basically strikes through the text. Okay. And one thing about HTML5 is that it renders in a way that you don't need, like browsers will render HTML regardless of what tags you have. And this is not something you rely on. So I'll show you what I mean about HTML. If I just say hi, you'd expect the browser to not render anything because this is not HTML. But if I View Explorer and I open this with Chrome, you notice that this says hi. And again, I can do B like this. And then you can do a lot of wonky stuff, which with HTML, and browsers will still render it. But this is not something you should rely on. And you should always rely on having your your head up here and your body down here in the HTML tags. So that's just a small note. Again, there are many tags. The next would be lists. I think lists are pretty useful. So you can imagine here. You notice that this is a list, test, and there are ordered lists as well. By UL is unordered list, and LI is list item. So ordered list item. And you notice this. Another tag that's really important, anchor tag. So in an anchor tag, it's a link. You can just imagine this as a link. Test. Right now, it doesn't link to anything. So when I click it, nothing happens. And here's where attributes come in. Attributes are basically data inside each tag. So you notice that above, previously I used something called a class attribute. This is just something to identify this element, the div element. This is something to identify it with. Here in links, in A tags, we identify it with, we don't identify it. We have an attribute called href, and that's the reference. So if I set this to, say, google.com, and now I should refresh, and I click test, it will go ahead and open in Google. And just to show you what attributes can do, if I say target is blank, it will go ahead and open that in a new tab, as you see here, instead of the same tab. So these are just almost imagine these as parameters for a function. The next thing would be the style attribute. So I talked about CSS last time. You can imagine that you can style a tag. So if I go back here and say style is color is red, you see that this heading turns red. Again, you can do lots of stuff with this. Font size is 300%, and it becomes much bigger. We'll go into CSS later, but that is just how you can include, that's one way you can include CSS in your HTML files. Now, next thing I want to say is block level versus inline elements. So there are so many elements that you can probably go to good resources, W3 schools. You go to HTML. You'll notice that they have all these tags that you can learn about. They have a tutorial version of this as well. And so I won't be going over all those because I think you get the idea. But I will go over some more important things like block versus inline. So a block level element is something that gets rendered as, I'll say like just a block. And an inline element is rendered inline. So actually I'll describe this more. If you notice up here, I use the M tags. It gets rendered as inline. So these tags, it gets rendered inline. And H1 and H2, on the other hand, do not get rendered inline. They're their own elements, and this will make more sense if I full screen this. And sorry, let me move my, okay. If I full screen this, so you'll notice that this takes up the whole level, the whole level, it shifts all the layout because it's a block level element. On the other hand, this tag right here, it's an inline element, so it gets rendered inline. So these are, this is a big, those are two important two really important. Those are two important things to know. And the most basic element you can have is a div tag. So a div is just like you can just imagine like an empty wrapper tag, and this is a block level wrapper tag. So if I say test, you notice that. Okay, I'll say something new. It's CS club rocks. This gets rendered on a new line, and it's a block level element. This is the most basic thing. There's no, it's not a paragraph. It's not a heading. It's not a link, anything. That's the most basic element. And if I do another one of these, yes, club, it gets rendered on a new line, or it gets rendered as another block. But there's another basic element called a span tag. So if I choose a span, this is inline. I say include it inside here. This is rendered inline with the div tag. Whereas if I use a div tag, yes, it gets rendered on a new line. So this is a distinction between an inline element and a block level element. Okay. The next thing that's cool to go over is forms. You'll notice that you fill out a lot of forms on websites. And here's a very basic form. It says first name, and I'll actually go ahead and comment these out so it doesn't distract. What did I just do? Just delete that for now. Okay. First name. Right here we have something called a label. That's the label. The label is for a name input. And the name input is this input. So we just use the input tag. And this is the same as what we've seen before, but it's just input. And the attribute is type is text. Now, if I want to say type is say radio or something, it becomes a radio button you can select. This is what you see on Chrome. If I say checkbox, this is a checkbox. And this is all inside a form element. It doesn't have to be inside a form element, but in order for a form to submit, it needs to be inside a form element. And the action is what happens when the user submits. So for now, I'll just leave it at that. We might go over that in the future meetings. But you can look, again, all these tags, you can look into documentation for more information. And I'm just going over essentially giving you a good idea of the most important tags. So here I'll show a table. Here I'll show a table. So here's the table tag. And you'll notice the T head tag is the table head. This is the top three columns. This is the head of a table. The T body tag is everything else. So that's these things. And then here you'll notice that TH, yeah, here's all the tables. In the browser default, it renders it the default as bold, but browsers may differ. So this styling is not something you should rely on. Table data is inside each table row. So again, table head, table row. So the head has one row. And there's three elements in there called table head element, table head element, table head element. Here's the table body. And for each row, there's three rows here. You notice that it says table data. And you'll get, so if I modify one of these to CS club, you notice that this changes to CS club. Tables are useful as well. And now I'll dive into CSS because I've covered the most important elements in HTML. You can just imagine any website you go over, you'll visit, has these basic elements. So CSS, we've already seen one way that CSS can be included, which is again, I could say style and then color, and then here it becomes red. So this isn't very good because let's say you have a whole web page style. It's not feasible at all to first style each element in inline. But the second thing is that it's not the second thing is that it's not good to mix your two things together. You mix HTML and CSS. That's just bad coding practice. So what second way to include CSS is internal CSS. We use something called a style tag. And again, anything in the head tag is not rendered. The head tag is hidden. This is just information about the website. So you can imagine this is why the styles will go in the head tag. So now I can, last time I talked about CSS selectors. It's very basic. I can select something called like say P is a tag name, and then here's the declaration. And then I'll say color is red. This is the property, and this is the value. I'll say blue. I save it, and the whole paragraph becomes blue. Now, again, yeah, and then selectors apply to anything really. So one thing I will say is, one thing I want to apply to show you something about the tables is I'll include, I don't have it. I'll style it right now. So let's say I want to select the table. Oh, I'm sorry. So, okay, sorry, Selectors can come in many forms. Selector can be, this is the most basic selector. It's selecting one element. Let's say I want to select the element right here. How would I want to select that? Well, I would say P, M, and then font size. And now I've selected just this M tag because I say P and then M. And notice that even though I have an M tag here, let's say I have an M tag over here next to ordered. So I'll say, here's the M tag around ordered. This style does not apply to this M tag because I say P and then M is a child of the P tag. Again, this is an M and it's a child of the P tag. So if I delete the P, this selects all M's across the document. And you'll notice this becomes huge too. So this should give a good idea of how selectors work. And I'll also say that commas will allow you to select multiple elements and give them the same style. So let's say I want the same style for the delete, which is over here. You'll see it's been deleted over here. And then here you'll see that it's the same style. Now, there's something called a pseudo selector as well. So these are selectors that are not actual elements on the index HTML. This is not rendered. So I have a button. Here's the button that says test. So the element that you would target is still button. So if I say button, the font size is 2 pixels, then it becomes really small. Now, a pseudo selector doesn't select the button itself because the button is rendered. The pseudo selector, that's why they say pseudo. It's not actually rendered on the page. But let's say I wanted to be a style when I hover on the button. So when I say button hover, I can say background, or I can just say font size. So now when I hover over that button, it becomes pretty big. This doesn't actually exist on the page, so that's why we call it pseudo selector. And doing this is not internal CSS is also not the best practice, because let's say you have multiple web pages across a website. How do you want to style each web page, right? You don't want to style the same button, and you don't want to paste that style across several web pages. So the next thing I'll show is how to include an external CSS file. So let's say I want to keep all these styles. I want to delete this tag. Now they go back all to normal. There's no styles to it. I go to a file called style CSS, and you'll notice that inside here, something called style CSS. Style.css. This is a CSS file. And I just pasted all the styles I had previously. Nothing happens right now. That's because I didn't include the style.css file yet. And to include it, you need something called a link tag. And this is a self-closing tag. And all a link tag does is it brings in a CSS file, an external CSS file. So now I have no styles internally, but I have this one tag saying, okay, this is style sheet, and I want it from style.css. And there, the styles come back. And if I delete the styles in here, okay, there are no styles. And quickly, I'll go over the core parts of CSS. We've already talked about the syntax, which is it's a selector. There's a bracket and there's a declaration, where the declaration is property : value. So we've already gone over that. Selectors, they're simple. Combinator and pseudo class. These are the three main ones. The combinator ones are just you're combining several PB. This is combining two selectors. It selects the bold tags inside the paragraph. Classes and ID. So let's say I want to target a specific paragraph tag. Let's say I have a second paragraph tag here. It says second paragraph. And I want to style just the first paragraph. How would I go about doing this? Well, the most common way to do this is give this an ID. Let's say I call this I'll give it an ID of test. Now, if I want to select this ID, I can say hashtag test, and now I can say something like color is red, and this paragraph becomes red. I'm only selecting the second one because there's an ID. So but the ID only allows you to select one element in this whole page. Let's say I have 3 paragraphs, and I want the first and the last one to be in the same style. Okay, let's say I want the first and this last paragraph to have the same style. It wouldn't make sense to give this 2 IDs saying like, oh, this is P1 and P2, and then just give them the same style. What you would rather do is say, give it a class. So class is also an identifier. So the class is my paragraph. This is my P. And here I can do the same down here. Class is my P. And if I go here, instead of using a hashtag, I'll use a period now. IP. And I'll say color is blue. And now I'm able to select this first one and the last one. So in any standard website you'll see repeated styles. This is how they repeat styles. If you see the button, if you see a button with the same color or the same hover animation, then you know that there's a class, there's a style for that button in a class. And all you need to do now is just apply the class to anywhere you want. So if I apply the class here, my P, and I'll remove the ID tag. This gets the blue style as well. So this is an easy way to reuse CSS. Now another, probably one of the most important things in CSS is the box model. So each of these are elements in the page, and you can inspect them by right-clicking, inspect, or Control-Shift-I, Command-Shift-I, whatever it might be. You see the elements. And what it also gives you is these styles here. Notice that I give it my P. So this style up here, it says my P, color is blue. And I can even put live CSS updates, like debug or try things out. Font size 2000%, right? So that's a good feature of browser developer tools. But this is what I'm trying to focus on. In this paragraph element, this is the CSS box model. This is the content right here. You'll notice the blue box right around the content. It's 999 pixels, blah, blah, blah. And then here's the padding, which right now it doesn't have any padding, and it'll have a border and a margin. So what this means is if I actually go back to my paragraph, so I'll select all paragraphs, and I say border is 2px solid black, you see that these paragraphs now have a border, a black border, right? And you'll notice that, okay, this paragraph element, you have a border of 2 pixels, and it says 2 right here. That's why you'll notice this is the border. Let's say I want more space in between my text and the border. Then you go to padding, and then let's say 20 pixels. And you notice that there's 20 pixels of padding in between the text, the content, and its border. Now, what about outside the border? That's something called a margin. So a paragraph by default has a margin because you can imagine when you're typing paragraphs, there's spaces between the paragraphs. This is a margin of 16 on top and 16 on bottom. And that simply separates things outside the border. So this is a CSS box model. And people usually go over, take a long time to go over that, but it's not really not that hard. And the last thing I want to introduce is JavaScript. So right now you already know HTML, CSS. All you need to do is like repeat, just practice a bit and say refer to documentation. And there's not much more to CSS and HTML. Okay, let's say in my file on the very top, I'll move this over again. Let's say on the very top, I have an input tag, and then let's call it text. So here's text input. And let's say right underneath it, I want to have a list. So this is already stuff we went over. My list content. Let's say we want this to be a to-do list. So I'll call this UL. I'll give it an ID of to-do. I'll just say button add item. So what we want to happen is when I click the button, I want it to add an item. So I call this add button. So I want to type something and then add it to the list. I can't do that yet, and you can't do that with just HTML and CSS. What you need is JavaScript, which again is the interactive part of each page. And you can include JavaScript by including a script tag. So just script. You can include internal, just like CSS, you can include it internally, but we're not going to do that. I'm just going to say source is index.js because of the same reason that we don't want to include internal CSS. So here I can say, here in our page, these are all elements. If I inspect it, I'll notice that, oh, it's in this tree of elements, right? This is called a document object model. Document object model. And it's just, this is probably a familiar picture that I showed last time. Here's a document, and in the document, you can treat all these things as these objects with children. So very quickly, I'll say let paragraph, let equals document ID. Remember I named this, what did I name it? Text input. I'll say button and this is called the add button. And I want my list as well, right? So let's say let to do. I believe that they called this the same thing. To do. And then remember, button has an attribute called on click. It's just an attribute of button. So I'll take this element on click, and you can treat it as a field. So if you coded in other languages before, okay, it's pretty familiar. On click, and then you don't have to worry about the syntax. It's just a function. Sorry. Button on click. So when I click it, I want something to happen. And what do I want to happen? I want to add whatever is in this input, and I want to add it to this list. So notice what is inside? How do we get the value inside the input? There's an attribute called value. You notice that this value shows up. I can change it, of course, but when I reload, that's the value that comes up because that's what the browser renders when it sees the value attribute. If I go in the index.js, I can get that value. I can say input value, and I'll get that value. But so it's on click, and then I'll create. What do I want to do? I want to add a list item to this to-do list. So I say let li equals document dot create element. It's an li, and then the next thing I want to do is I want to set this li's list item text content to the input value. So input dot value. For some reason I feel it's wrong. Value. And then I can say to do dot append child li. So we're appending this child that we just created, adding it to the thing. So I should refresh. Test. Oh, add item. And then you can already imagine what you could do with delete. You can say remove child, and you can add buttons to each element. So this is already the beginning of a to-do list app. So to do, add item. And let's say I want to clear the value after I add it. So input value equals this. So now it's much more like add item. And it's clear. And this is the basic of JavaScript. Again, anything you read on documentation is just an extension of these core concepts. Like say HTML, you want a new tag, just to read more about it, but it's still going to be in the same form of a tag. And Rohan, I believe you have something to add after this.
Okay, well, we don't have that much time, but basically, I guess what we're going to be doing next week and the week after is we're going to start building our own app using React, and we're going to explain that. So, essentially, first things first, to make sure that you guys could like keep up and so that it's actually interesting to you guys, I'd prefer if you guys actually go to our website and start doing the tutorials we put there, because if you're familiar with HTML and CSS, all of this is going to be so much easier. So, if you have time to do it, try to do that. I don't think we have that much time to crowdsource ideas for what app you guys want us to make, but if you guys have any ideas, please let us know right now or message us or anything. And also, we're gonna ask you guys to do a project on your own, so try to contact an officer with your idea, and we can help you, and we can help you make whatever. So just come up with something that you actually want to use, and it would be pretty cool, and we'll help you get it done. So if anybody has any ideas, feel free to let me know right now. But other than that, we are done for today. All right, yeah. See you guys then. Oh, no, we forgot the flag. Okay, okay, don't worry, we'll post
Oh my
it.
god.
Yeah, bro, we literally
Every
planned this
time.
out, dude. Okay,
Oh
yeah,
shit, I
don't
gotta go to
worry.
class. I gotta go to class.
Yeah, okay. See you
All right.
guys. Yeah.
See ya.